This is Stellaris. We're on Xbox Series X, taking a look at this now optimized version of the game. The load times are reduced, apparently by half in most situations. We're still getting that 1080p, but we get 60 FPS now, so that higher frame rate. No HDR is noted, and improved combat performance and improved simulation speeds of up to 4 times, which is funny because it's a 4-time strategy title. And I'm joined by
Kevin, Kane2222.
And we're going to be talking about this title because he has experience in it and I have not played this one yet. So 4-time strategies is kind of the style of the game. Tell us the scope and the gist of what we're doing gameplay wise in this title.
You are starting out as a civilization. You can choose your opening to whether you've been established on that planet your whole time. It's really neat. You can become like a lost colony where it gives the description of like you've been sent from another planet and you lost contact with it, and it took a while for your species and civilization to get back up to like star level. But it's really cool. You start with basically making your whole civilization. You customize what type of species they are, like fungoid or arachnids or mammals. You can make them human-like. You can make them look Vulcan-looking from like Star Trek. You start off, you pick all your ethnics and civilization, and it makes the many different forms of government you make. And when you start the game, it'll give you a little backstory to what it was. Like, I ended up making a military-like, Earth-like people with citizen service, and it gave me this whole description of my people fought all these wars, and now they've gotten to the stars, and you have freedom as long as you serve in the military. It's really neat. And from there, you span out from your solar system and try explore and meet new aliens and make contacts, and eventually, yeah, you play diplomacy and try to become a good guy and help the galaxy, or you can become a bunch of bad guys and try conquer everything, or you can conquer everything in the name of justice, right? But yeah, you're out trying to take over the galaxy with your new empire.
So in general, there's a lot of like control elements of this one. Tell us a bit about just kind of like a regular turn, because I assume this is somewhat turn-based to a degree. Just a regular shift in the galaxy. What are you doing in a regular setup?
Like, you start time, and you can speed or slow up the time, but it's a continuous process of everything moving forward at the same time. It depends what you're doing at the start, because at the beginning, you're kind of just sending out science ships, and you want to build a bunch of science ships and a bunch of construction ships and have them go out and explore different spots. You'll run into neat anomalies, which are really cool, and they have really awesome little stories to them. Like, I found a planet that had Titanic life on it, and it told me that, like, if I wanted to, I could basically enslave them and turn them into like an army species for me or something. It was really cool. But that's kind of the start of your game. And then as you build up, it gets a little more political as you start to bump into new empires. Even gives you a neat description of your people back on your home world. They're shocked that there's other alien life out there. What does this mean for your empire? And you kind of try to establish your borders, make yourself as big as you can. And as you get even later in the game, it becomes a lot more strategy-based for the war-like scenarios where you're trying to take out fleets and do little flank maneuvers and get in behind and get their space stations before they get yours and conquer planets. Like, it's really neat how what you're doing in the scenarios changes a lot as the game progresses.
That's quite interesting in regards to just kind of giving us a good setup of how you play the game. So let's talk a little bit about that strategy. What kind of moves do you like to do? And do you find yourself kind of moving more towards war, or are you more of like a diplomatic type of player? And what's the end game in this? Like, how do you kind of work towards victory?
There's a couple different ways towards victory. It does, once again, depend on your play style. I tend to go more warlike myself. I tend to have more fun with it. I just recently started doing a playthrough where I'm trying to make more of a political standing people. There's like a galactic committee you can be a part of and basically cast votes, and if you get more influence in it, you can basically control the votes casted more UN-like. But I usually tend to go warlike myself. Strategy wise, for like the beginning of the game, is the way you'll see hyperspace lane connections between solar systems, and at certain points there's choke points where basically you can't get to certain parts of the galaxy unless you come through that specific star. So what I like to do and would recommend is take your science ships and just follow the hyperspace routes to these choke points and try basically build your starport systems to claim these systems all the way up to them, and then close your borders off, so just at least for the beginning, so that you can fill in all the rest of it. And it might take you a little bit of time to do it, but you'll be able to take a big chunk. Obviously different playthroughs are different. If you end up beside an ancient empire, you're kind of doomed in that aspect that you will not be able to go that way, or they'll just beat you up and bully you till you submit to them and stuff like that. So it does depend on the playthrough, but I tend to go warlike, and in the end you're basically trying to conquer the galaxy, or you're trying to make like a federation with the galaxy. I've had some playthroughs where I ended up in a federation, or if you're doing like multiplayer with someone, which is really fun, you tag team together if you want, and you end up taking over the whole galaxy, and you kind of sit, and it's basically victory of the game once you take it over. But it's continuous because there's like end game crises that you can put on, and the end game crisis varies from like 3 different things. There's like an extra dimensional energy beings that come through and they try eat your whole galaxy, and then there's like the Pertheon Scourge, and they're trying to eat the galaxy too, but they're almost more of like a alien parasite thing in the way they spread. And that's really cool too, because where your game can be about conquering the galaxy and all these aliens, sometimes if the endgame crisis is turned on so hard, you'll end up banding together with these guys just to try stop these creatures or extra dimensional beings from eating your whole galaxy. And sometimes that's just your end goal of the game, is to end that and then see who's left and surviving in the galaxy. So there's a couple different means to the end, but it's mainly about conquest, or conquest with your allies. And victory is when you finally decide that there's nothing really more I can do with this, I own everything.
Sounds like you're fighting the flood a little bit from Halo there, with the parasites coming in.
Oh yeah, basically they're very neat. I've seen people do mods in that on the computer where like they basically went out and made like Star Wars and that. I don't know if they might even have it, but I think it would be really cool if they had like a Halo mod and you could basically switch the Pertheon to the Flood. But yeah, that's what they're doing, and like the story behind that is really cool too. You fight them, they seem like just a random alien running around eating the galaxy, but if you end up going with psychics for your people down the technology path, you can end up talking to them. And I don't know if I should give it away, but they have a very neat backstory, and you realize that they're like basically running away from something, and that's why they're eating galaxy to galaxy, because they're trying to build up enough food to go back to sleep and sneak away to another galaxy before these guys find them.
Oh, that sounds very like the Halo narrative, actually, kind of, which is funny.
Right?
Anyways, so you mentioned there's multiplayer here.
Yes, there is. From what I've had on console, I believe it's only like 4 or 5 players. I think it is 4
players
per match. Yeah, 4 players, which I thought there should be way more. I was kind of disappointed where I tried to literally get like 6-7 guys all in our match, and we were gonna play a risk game basically, but then we got stuck with the 4, and it was like, oh, okay, whatever. But I've played it like with my father a lot, and that's really fun or whatever. You can basically take on the whole galaxy yourself, or the couple times we've done it, it's hard not to get mad at each other, like Risk or Monopoly or something, when the other guy's losing. But yeah, you can choose your own empires and then end up fighting each other. But sometimes it's more on who has the more powerful allies than the other guy. Sometimes that wins the fight. But the multiplayer is really fun, especially if you're just going to team up together, because then you can do all your research agreements, your defensive pacts, declare war on the same enemies. Really helps with those endgame crises I was talking about, where you can... It's a lot more better being coordinated, because even though you can have the AI helping you, unless you have like the Federation and you take control of the Federation fleet, which is even then still under your control, you're not exactly commanding their armies what to do. So multiplayer is really good for making coordinated attacks on endgame crises and big, huge fallen empires and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say give multiplayer a try.
This sounds incredibly expansive. Okay, so let's rein it back here. How does the combat work in the game? What sort of structure is set up there for that?
Combat is a little more basic. It tends to be the bigger fleet wins, but sometimes technology can be a deciding factor. Like if you have the way better lasers, or you have like the Vulcan cannons and stuff like that, like, and they have very basic stuff, you can have the smaller fleet and win. But usually, yeah, there's not a lot of control to your fleet. They just kind of run at each other and attack. You'll get admirals for your fleet that give them bonuses, like they'll give them more ship hull points and upgrade the health of everything, or they'll give them a farther distance that they can start shooting, but they usually get really close and engage quickly. So I always thought the distance firing didn't mean that much because it doesn't come into play that long, but it just becomes a mad scramble with them, and from there you can either cause them to retreat or not. Where I find most of the strategy comes in the combat is like when I am the smaller empire, I'll basically try hide my fleets, jumping in between stars and watching where they're attacking. And if they send 2 or 3 fleets, I'll try wait till they're not grouped together and they'll split up, and then you'll send your fleets to try attack the smaller one. So I'd say that's the most strategy to it. And there are other things too, where I've seen people who've debated like if you can do a full fleet of corvettes that they're really hard to hit, they have high evasion, that some people think that's totally the way to go, an entire corvette fleet. I just love battleships. I make big, huge, expensive fleets that drain my empire's economy, but I think they're just too cool. But yeah, it does. It mostly just comes down to bigger fleet wins, and then a basic strategy of where you're sending your fleets at that time.
Okay, that helps break down the combat quite a bit. Okay, so I understand there are elements of governing and government in general that you can control. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, there's so much you can do with your government, even just when you're starting picking your species. The type of government you make, which can be a democracy, an oligarchy, empire, or a dictatorship. And then from there, the traits or the civics abilities you pick will change what it is. Like basically, I picked an oligarchy and I added citizen service, and they became a citizens republic. And it totally changes the dynamic of what your empire is, and you choose your ethics between whether you're more warlike or more peaceful, or you like giving people freedom or not freedom, to whether you're spiritualist or materialistic, and the different forms of which your society can go. And you like, even from there it gets more in depth to the policies you create. You can be very warlike and be a purging species, or you can be warlike in the name of giving people freedom. You can believe in freedom for your people but not aliens outside of your empire. You can believe in freedom for everyone. You can have slaves of people outside of your empire. You can have like a feudal caste system, where basically you can enslave your own people. You can turn your whole empire into a giant mega corporation. There's so much you can do with your government and society.
Tell us a bit about how the game looks when you're playing it. You know, can you see details on the planets? What do the ships look like, you know, visually?
Ships are very neat. You pick at the very start of the game when selecting your empire what they look like. I know there's different mods or expansion packs you can buy that give you more different fleets. There's the Avion, or I believe like named after birds. Their ships look very neat, almost remind me of the Covenant. I generally pick them unless I make like a human like empire, then I pick the basic mammal ships, but they look very cool. You can do a little bit of customization and designs on like whether they have big guns or carriers, and that changes the look on them, which is neat. The planets and the stars are probably the most visually stunning thing of it. Like the black holes look really cool. You'll get some solar systems with different suns in them, and they make the classification to whether it's a red dwarf or, you know, a big yellow sun like the one we have here. But they look really cool, and Yeah, a lot of the Titan, the fallen empires and that, like with basically almost Dyson spheres or like halo rings and stuff built around planets, the mega structures you can build. And I know if you there's a DLC you can get where you can build these mega structures, and they look very neat.
Interesting. Thanks for breaking that down. The Dyson sphere, like the concept of that is always really cool to me because, there's lots of top tier civilization concepts in space about that. So this game seems to really play into the future exploration of what could happen in space, and that sounds pretty cool. So tell us just a special moment you've had with the game.
One of the more special moments was becoming the psychic and talking to the Pertheon, because it changed the game where I thought these creatures were totally mindless beings. They weren't, which was really cool. It added more depth to the game that unless you picked that technology path was really neat. There's so many interesting moments. There's a lot of stuff you'll read. On one of the later playthroughs I just did, I picked a human empire, and I even selected Earth, and the game's really neat that it'll give you the solar system Sol, our solar system, and we'll be the third planet from the sun, and you'll have Mars and Neptune in your solar system. And when you read into your planetary features, there was some interesting descriptions of certain things that happen. Like you can clean up certain worlds, and one of the cleanups you could do on our world was to get rid of the plastic oceans floating in the middle of like the Pacific, I believe. I thought that was really neat. And one of the descriptions I read was the Albertan crater, and I thought that was hilarious because that's around where I live. But this crater, basically, it described that at some point in the 22nd century, a meteor came by. Everyone thought it was the end of humanity, but this meteor just came through and ended up smoking half of Alberta, described. So humanity continued, and I thought that was a hilarious description of everything. But yeah, there's so many different, a lot of very different memories and a lot of very cool things. Like even when the extra dimensional beings came through and they told us that they won't talk to you. They'll just tell you that, oh, there's so much food in this galaxy, and that really creeped me out. That like, oh, okay, they're only here for one thing, and that really made me have to unite. And they started destroying almost the whole galaxy on me because I made it really hard. And then everyone banded together, the AIs and me, and we actually ended up fighting them back. And by the time that was over, everyone was at peace with each other, and that was a very memorable moment. Like there's just so many cool moments you'll have, and they'll be very different from game to game depending on what you do.
Well, thanks for sharing thoughts on this title because it sounds like there's some crazy stuff going on, and I'm glad I actually had you come in and talk about this. Let's just kind of go into wrap up thoughts on the game.
Game's very neat. I'd say give it a shot. It's really great for different sci-fi concepts. So if you like to ponder how we would get to space and what we would do and the different ways it would go, that's very cool. The governments are very neat. You can be just about every type of society you can imagine, which is really neat. So if you want to sit down and nerd out about a bunch of different things and play a strategy game, this is for you.
Great. Thank you for stopping by and talking about Stellaris.
Thank you very much for having me.
System survey complete. Anomaly found.